Whiskers. Welcome to East County Live. Tonight we're talking about the language of peace, nonviolent communication. Our two guests are Paul Sterling, who's been on our show before talking about the peace tree. Tonight he's wearing a different hat as a senior partner at the Language of Peace Communications Consulting Company. Paul's been studying communication for over 20 years and has been teaching it for over 15 years to government workers, businesses, in schools, churches, and prisons. Paul trained with Marshall Rosenberg, the creator of nonviolent communication, and Paul is also trained in neuro-linguistic programming, neuroassociative conditioning. We also have Kristen Denton, who is an instructor in communication skills and has been for the last 17 years. Kristen teaches communications development courses at Lakewood High School in Denver for a group of at-risk students. She, too, attended a workshop with Marshall Rosenberg on nonviolent communication and found that it really struck a chord with her values, and she practices that in her teaching. So welcome, Paul and Kristen. We're glad to have you here tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for driving down from Fort Collins. On the materials that you sent me in preparation for your show, there was a quote that really struck me. It said, "Transform the way you communicate, and you can transform your relationship with anyone, including yourself."
You know, and the interesting thing about that, it's almost especially yourself. Because if we can't find peace with ourselves, how are we going to find it with anyone else?
Very, very true.
And it was really interesting when I started learning about nonviolent communication from Marshall, and I started by reading his books before I went to Sweden and studied with him, and it really gave me hope. You know, there's a possible solution for creating peace on this incredibly insane planet right now.
Yeah, we have lots of communication problems that cause us to go into conflicts, and it's more than just cultural differences. I think a lot of it is just not listening, just thinking about other people's agendas, or not thinking about other people's ideas, but thinking about one's own agendas.
Yeah, I almost think that if we look at it, and I want to dive into the material, but I think about if the listeners, if the viewers, I do a lot of radio, so listeners, but the viewers think about it, what we're really given is communication is probably the most difficult thing we'll ever have to do in our lives, but we're not trained in it. It's like if I ask you right now to draw a picture of a person, most people would draw a stick figure. It's not because we're not artists and creative, but we stopped developing our artistic skills. Most people did early on. And we stopped developing our communication skills early on. And this gives them some tools to really advance their skills.
We see a lot of examples of bad communication. I mean, I've been appalled at the kinds of discourse on TV that passes for communication, passes for conversation, passes for talking about really important topics, say on some of the talk shows, or on radio too. I mean, we have lots of examples of how not to do things.
True. And in our relationships growing up, we never really learn about how to really communicate our feelings and needs. We don't even in our culture really learn to talk about our feelings. And so like in the classroom when I'm teaching NVC, I teach the students the vocabulary for their feelings so that they have the words to talk about it. Because that's what, well, I suppose we should say what, why don't you take that away? Okay. So what the nonviolent communication
Now that was nonverbal communication
that was
we just said right there.
Nonverbal. You see, you cannot not communicate. You know, some people say, my husband or my wife, they stop communicating with me. They're silent. And I say, no. What it is you may not like their communication, but even silence is communication.
And it doesn't have to be adverse communication either. We interrupted you, though. You were talking about being in the classroom.
Yeah.
So,
well, let me give you a little overview of what the nonviolent communication is. It was developed by Marshall Rosenberg some years ago. It's a whole system for communicating our feelings and needs. And there's 4 steps to it. There's an observation, a feeling, a need, and a request. And then there's 2 sides to it. We do these, the observation, feelings, needs, request, in both speaking and then listening. And when we're listening, translating what somebody says to us to find the feeling and need underneath. Like if a little 4-year-old comes running up to you, it's 9 o'clock at night, They run up to you and, "Mommy, I hate you." You don't take that seriously. You don't think that your child actually hates you, right? You translate that.
No, not till they're 16.
Not
Yeah.
Well,
That's what happened.
That's the point. Because at 4, we can translate easily. We all know that they don't really mean that. And we put them to bed. The next day, we're fine. But as adults, we still have those same communicate. The little 4-year-old comes out in us a lot. We go running up to people saying something that really didn't communicate exactly what we wanted. And it's really important to be able to translate on the listening end when we hear those attack messages, to be able to translate into the real feeling and need underneath there that the person is trying to communicate. Even now, but when you're older, it's going to be some authority figure telling you no. You need to be able to hear what their feelings and needs are underneath that.
Go ahead.
There's an expression that most people have heard. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. And that's actually only a partial truth. It's one of those wonderful things that we repeat but isn't really true. Like practice makes perfect. That's not true. I've been practicing typing for 20-some years, and I'm terrible at typing. So practice.
No, wait. How could that be?
It could, it's what do you practice?
So what's the part about
Now,
the first?
the
what's
communication
the
part is
punchline?
not what you say, it's how you say it. Well, there's a lot of truth in that. How you say it will affect how somebody hears it. The tone that you use, the body language. But the part that's more important that Kristen started to bring up is it's not what you hear, it's how you hear it. And learning how to translate difficult to hear messages to the underlying feelings and needs. Almost all messages, if they're emotional, are either an act of love or cry for help. And if we can see them as a cry for help, now sometimes there's strategies, the way they're crying for help makes it really hard to hear. They're throwing dishes, they're messing up the house, they're doing all sorts of things that are acting out, but underneath it, if you could just translate and go, oh, that's a cry for help. Domestic violence, I work in prisons, domestic violence, it's a cry for help. Now, it's not a good strategy.
Yeah.
But the challenge is, unless we give them other tools, they'll continue to use the tools they have. Putting them in prison doesn't help, because it doesn't give them new tools. And so what we're doing is we've created this course together to kind of give people the tools. And what Marshall has done, a lot of the information was out there in the communication field. What Marshall did is give us the picture. When you're putting together a puzzle, if you don't have the picture, it's easy to get the outside edges because they're straight edges. But it's hard to get to the heart of it without the picture. And see, what MVC does is it gives you the overall picture so you can move to the heart. You can have deeper conversation. A lot of times the natural outcome of a conversation is misunderstanding, disagreements, arguments. And this gives you a way to connect to another human being, to create compassion, connection, and understanding.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One of the things that you've done is you've brought us a chart here that
Absolutely.
maybe we want to go to the chart and talk about that. We've got lots of choices on that chart to look at.
Well, actually, one of the basic choices that you have just when you're starting, and it's the top of the chart, it says the communication choice. And the choice we always have is, are we going to make a connection with another human being or build a case against them? And a lot of times we think building a case, if we build a big enough case and use blame, shame, guilt, gather evidence, and try to prove our beloved wrong, let me just prove that I'm right and you're wrong, and you'll want to do what I want you to do.
How do we do this against ourselves? I mean, getting back to the quote that we first started talking about.
Well, I should lose weight. I'm lazy. I should quit smoking. I should, all of the things. If you ever make a mistake, how do you treat yourself when you make a mistake? When you need the most compassion and empathy, you're embarrassed, you're sad, you're disappointed, you may have lost a job interview, you may have lost a relationship, and you're really upset and disappointed, and what do? Normally you beat yourself up. Mm-hmm. And we do that with ourselves, and we do that with our beloved, and we do that with our children. With your children, when they come home from school, normally you say, how was school? They say, fine. Why do they give you a one-word answer and then run in the other room and spend 2 hours on the phone?
Good question. I don't know.
Because Chris and I both, I go in and teach. I do some work with Goodwill, brings me into schools, and when I interview the kids, they all say the same thing. They know it's parents are gathering evidence. You know, well, why don't you do this? They're building a case. They're gathering the evidence to build a case. So what do you do when somebody's trying to build a case against you? Is you withhold the evidence. You shut up.
But parents don't start from that premise to begin with. I mean, you know, as a parent, I wanted to know what my kids were doing in school. Where did it go terribly wrong that it became a trial kind of thing?
Well, I ask, and it's really interesting. I'll ask. When I was in prison, there was one guy there, and he said, well, with my daughter, I mean, we have great communication, and she can tell me anything. So I said, okay. Your 14-year-old daughter comes home and says, you know, Dad, my boyfriend, who's a little older than me, wants me to do stuff, and I'm not comfortable with it. So what is his response? What's the kid's name? What's the kid's number? It's like immediately he's building a case, gathering evidence. He's going to go and intercede. What? He's going to go beat the kid up. Sorry, I got ahead of myself with the language there. So what we want to do is just ask her how she's feeling about it. What is she needing? And stay connected with her so that she knows you're not going to use that against her later. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, what's going to happen is communication ends. How's school? Fine. How's your boyfriend? Good. One-word answers, one-way conversations.
So you talked about the 4 steps of the process. The first one was observing.
Observation as opposed to evaluation. Rosenberg really stresses that we need, if we start with just a clear observation about what happened. When you threw your socks on the floor, actually that's even evaluative. When I found your socks on the floor, because you don't want to, throwing them on the floor makes it sound even bad.
Or you threw them on the floor.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. I don't even know how they got there. The dog put them there. When I found the socks on the floor. And it's trying to make your communication as clear as that with the observation. So that's the observation step. So when I found your socks on the floor, I felt very discouraged. And you want to make sure that you're saying a feeling that's actually a feeling. That it's not an evaluation of a feeling, but the actual feeling, something you feel in your heart. And then we move to the need that you have. When I found your socks on the floor, I felt very discouraged because I have a need for cooperation in keeping up the house. And then because all communication is a request eventually, whether you know it or not, it's usually there's a request behind it, then we put on a clear request. Would you be willing to help me keep the floor clean?
And you might even go before that. Would you be willing to tell me what you heard me say? Because you want to make sure there's a quality of connection that you want to have with another human being before you even make a request. Because if they hear it that they did something bad or wrong, even if they do pick up the socks, it's for reasons that you're both going to regret later. Guilt, shame, blame. And what you might say a beautiful message like that, and they say, yeah, you think I'm a slob. That's what you just said. So you don't want to ask anybody to do anything if that's the way they heard it. So you want to spend some time connecting. Say, oh, okay, thank you for telling me what you heard me say. I'd like you to hear something different. Can I tell you again? And you keep going. People are uncomfortable.
It's a time-intensive process.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Actually, it is and it isn't.
Do we have a time for this?
Do we have the time not to do it?
Yes.
See, what happens is you're going to have to ask for those socks 500 times.
Yeah.
Every time you go in the room, the socks are going to be there. Now, you might be able to force them to quickly. You don't pick up the socks, you don't get allowance. So you're not getting, whatever punishment we could use. But you might have a little bit longer conversation like this. And at the end, though, you have a connection, and you don't have to have that conversation again. So if you look at the long run, this is much shorter.
Or maybe after a couple of times. Are you saying that just having one conversation like this will change things?
Oh, not necessarily.
Okay.
No. It would probably take time. With any students of mine, it's over and over again. Because once you clear up the sock problem, then there's going to be the
Right, then there's the dirty dishes, or the ants coming in to eat the half-eaten sandwiches.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's just a way to communicate these things, so that you're making sure that you're staying connected with the person you're talking to instead of building a case. And that it's real clear. I know my mom used to bring in the laundry, and she'd throw it down on the sofa, and then she'd go, and that was a request.
And you'd have to translate it.
Yeah, you had to translate that. So,
good point.
Yeah.
Translating it, yeah.
So this is another way to do it, so that the request is real clear and there's not too much translation going on.
We only have 2 minutes left, I'm so sorry to say. So
the seminar.
you're going to be having a seminar. It's up in Estes Park. Tell us about that.
Okay, well, in 2 hours you can basically learn the basic principles, but it takes a couple of days of practicing them because they can be a little awkward at first. We're learning new patterns in communication. And so what the seminar is about is giving you a little bit of information and a lot of practice. And people come with their challenges. And we'll do a lot of role plays. And a lot of the situations, we've had parents that haven't talked to their kids in 7 years. One woman hadn't talked to her brother because of a disagreement in years. And we take the most difficult situations you can come up with, and we role play them, and people have such incredible breakthroughs.
So it's this weekend. It's the 14th and 15th.
15th and 16th.
15th and 16th,
Friday. It's Friday night and Saturday.
So the 15th and 16th at the Inn at Estes Park. I think we're going to put up a website that you can go to.
Yes.
www.peacetreecom.com. And sign up there, give us a call, ask any questions, send us an email, whatever's most convenient. We'll talk to you a little bit more about it then and get you signed up for the 2-day Friday evening and all day Saturday.
And if people wanted to communicate with you individually on something outside of the seminar, how can they get in touch with you?
The same way they can. I think there's a phone number at the bottom of the page there.
And my email's there too, teachpeace2@earthlink.net.
Okay.
So.
And we've got time for one last comment from both of you.
It's such a transforming method of communication. It's really transformed my relationship with Paul, with my students in the classroom, with my family. I really would recommend this for everybody. It's really wonderful.
Okay.
Absolutely. Einstein said we can't solve the problems, our serious problems, with the same kind of thinking that we were thinking when we created the problem. Now I butchered the quote. But it's like with our language, we can't solve the problems we've created in our relationships and in our life using the same language and using language the same way that we did when we created them. Give yourself tools. It's a set of tools that empower you to do things you could never do before. And I know I've studied all sorts of communication, and of all the things I've learned, this has been the one where when things are tough, that I can still use it.
Okay, we're going to have to stop with that. Thanks so much for Paul and Kristen for driving down from Fort Collins. Good luck with the seminar on Friday and Saturday, and hope to have you back again sometime.
Great.